one in 1904, together of course with Mrs. Hudson, the owner and landlady of the house. And this room I was standing at, this is the heart of the 221B. This is the study room, where Sherlock Holmes, always sitting in that chair over there, and Dr. Watson, always sitting in this one, would have met their clients, discussed the cases, and just of course enjoyed the leisures of their spare time by having some drinks, for example from the bar over here, where you can see there's some scotch, some gin and port wine from my hometown. If you don't mind, I would like to tell you a bit more about some of my favorite features in the room. To start with this portrait over here, if everyone can see. You can see a very young and very attractive lady. Her name was Irene Adler. You might have heard of her from the scandal in Bohemia when she became the first person to ever outsmart Sherlock Holmes. Just next to her, it's the bust of the Queen Victoria. VR stands for Victoria Regina. It's Latin for Queen Victoria. Once again, as well with the bust, Sherlock Holmes showing his patriotism. Those letters, those were made just before the Musgrave ritual case, when Sherlock Holmes was actually very bored at home because he really didn't have any case in hands yet. So out of this frustration, he decides to practice his targeting by taking this gun out of the wall and shooting the VR into the back wall. Of course, Mrs. Hudson was not very happy with the new decoration, as you can imagine. I'd like to draw your attention now please to this desk over here to your left, where you can see there's many medical related devices and all the books and a first aid case. This is because this desk used to belong to Dr. John Watson. And over here as well, a very old newspaper dating back to 1881, that is precisely the year when Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson came to live in a house. I'll now proceed my speech in the room to your left, so if you don't mind please to make your way around at this rest. If you don't mind please to come all the way inside. So as well as adding to the study room, I'll do to the Sherlock Holmes bedroom and tell you a bit more about some of my favorite features. To start with those two boxes over the bed. The one on the left is a Victorian detective set, as you can see by the instruments, and also the hat that would have been worn as a disguise. The one to the right, we can see a deerstalker inside. Deerstalker is the name that we give to this type of hat that we always picture Sherlock Holmes wearing. That one in specific used to belong to one of the first and most famous actors that played Sherlock Holmes. His name was William Gilley. Just behind you, ladies and gentlemen, here over the dresser, we can see a makeup case, and you might be wondering why a makeup case in a man's bedroom? That doesn't make any sense. But well, Sherlock Holmes wasn't any man. He was the master of disguise. So indeed, in order to disguise himself, he would have worn makeup in his face so he could infiltrate the criminal circuits of London. And speaking of criminals, relatives, they are all real-life Victorian murderers, criminals from the Victorian period. If you'd like, I can tell you a bit more about a few of them. For example, this gentleman with a tall hat. His name was Dr. Thomas Neil Cream. He was also known as the Lambeth Poisoner, being Lambeth a location here in South London, yeah? And indeed, he killed several people all over the world by poisoning them. He was as well one of the leading suspects in the Jack the Ripper case. Underneath is Charles Pitts. He was as well a murderer and a burglar. He killed his own wife. And he's actually the only real criminal that was mentioned in the stories of Sherlock Holmes. He was mentioned in the Adventures of the Illustrious Client as being a very close friend to Sherlock Holmes. So I am finished now. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please do feel free to ask me. Eu também falo português e hablo un poquito de español if everyone needs. Anyway, so I'm going to remove that barrier from the other room so you can take some nice photos, and whenever you're ready, there's 2 more floors upstairs, straight above Dr. Watson's and Mrs. Hudson's bedroom.